Imagine launching a new SaaS tool. User growth is solid and the feedback is glowing. Then your revenue abruptly flatlines, while an unknown competitor's sales spike by 300% in just 3 weeks. They didn't innovate or build a superior product. They simply went to your public GitHub repository, cloned your code, and launched it as their own rival platform. This chart illustrates the modern transparency trap. The path on the left shows what you want, individual users auditing your code for security. But the path on the right shows the risk. Making your code fully open source provides a ready-to-monetize blueprint directly to massive enterprise competitors. Those enterprise vendors can take your engineering, spin up a hosted version, and undercut your pricing because they have zero R&D costs. They use your own work to freeze you out of the market you created. Under a standard, OSI-approved open-source license, this entire sequence of events is 100% legal. By choosing that license, you've granted them the right to do it. This is what we call the intellectual property hemorrhage. Founders, in an effort to build community trust through transparency, find themselves signing away the very assets that make their business viable. For a modern SaaS product, pure open source can become a commercial liability. The challenge is finding a way to let users see the code without surrendering the right to be the only one selling it. To address this, many organizations have begun moving toward a different approach, the Source Available Restricted License, or SARL. Think of a SARL like a glass vault. The public can look through the glass to inspect the architecture and verify the security practices, but a physical barrier prevents them from walking away with the contents for profit. Looking at the legal structure of a SARL, the transparency begins here in Section 2, the Grant of Rights. This clause permits users to access the repository. They can pull the code for internal evaluation, use it for educational research, and perform deep cybersecurity audits. However, the scope of that grant is defined by the very next part of the document. Section 3 contains the restrictions clause. By drawing a hard line between these two sections, the SAR legally separates the act of viewing the code from the right to commercialize that code. Those restrictions serve as specific legal boundaries. The first major provision is an absolute prohibition on taking the software and offering it as a hosted SaaS platform. The second provision blocks competitors from white-labeling the interface, repackaging the tool as their own product. As this logic tree outlines, the third restriction prohibits using your source code to engineer a competing product. When boundaries are crossed, Section 7 activates, immediately voiding all rights granted to the user. Because competitors are legally barred from the commercial layer, you retain exclusive power to charge for enterprise licenses, sell support contracts, and offer the official hosted version. This defensive framework extends beyond standard applications. It is increasingly used to protect proprietary AI models and fintech algorithms from large enterprise entities. These specific clauses convert the static text of a license into a functional perimeter for your intellectual property. For this protection to be enforceable, the deployment must be explicit. As shown in this directory structure, the license agreement must sit in a dedicated file at the very root of the project. You also have to establish clear notice. This means placing a protected under SORL badge on your GitHub README, inside your documentation portal, and on the software's login screen. However, drafting these documents is a high-stakes task. Using vague language or including contradictory terms can render the entire license unenforceable in a legal dispute. There are also jurisdiction conflicts to consider. A restriction valid in one country might be disregarded in another, which is why a specialist technology lawyer is required to validate the enforceability of the terms. Finally, there is the risk of third-party component contamination. If you mix your SARL-protected code with components running under certain open-source licenses, those conflicting rules can create a legal deadlock for your entire codebase. The assumption that developers must choose between community trust and commercial security is a false choice. Code transparency is a powerful tool for building a modern platform, but it is only a sustainable strategy if you have defined the commercial boundaries of your work first.